All right, take it away.
Thank you, everybody, and welcome. Thank you, Mandy. Thank you, everybody. Welcome to Reimagining State and Regional OER Conferences. Today, joining us Friday, November 13th, 2020 for the Open Education Conference. Today, I just want to start by introducing myself. I'm Rebel Cummings-Sauls. I'm the Director at Digital Services and OER for the Florida Virtual Campus. Just a bonus that will be our new name coming forward. We're going to continue with that just for those who might know a little bit about that going on. So I've been in state and regional conferences since about June of 2017, starting with OER from Vision to Action and Midwest Conference, then moving to Florida with supporting Open Florida in our OER summits here. I've had the pleasure of presenting at LPF this year, and so I bring a little bit of experience with that transition to online and continuing our services through Florida Virtual Campuses. We support members online throughout the state all the time. So, and of course, I was able to volunteer just a little bit in the beginning and with reviewing for Open Ed. So I'm glad to have you all here today. I just want to kind of start with a little bit of a cozy message. Welcome. Please take your shoes off. For those of you who are at the house or those of you who are maybe in your workplace, under your desk, kick them off, relax. This is a time to kind of engage with us. We're hoping throughout this panel, we have some interactive parts of this, but I do want to just let you know that this panel will be trying to save and openly share these contributions, including things that are added in the chat. So please do not add anything into the session that you don't want recorded or publicly viewed later. Although I do want to start by asking you all to join us on our bit.ly link, bit.ly, and it's going to be /3, lowercase k, lowercase s, uppercase q, lowercase I, uppercase T, uppercase Y. This will be a shared document you'll be able to use throughout the session with all attendees, and hopefully our panelists here will be able to engage when they're not speaking as well. In addition to the chat, we also welcome you to unmute yourself and ask questions when those times arise. So thank you and welcome. At this time, I want to just remind everybody that we'll also be using Menti. So you can go to menti.com. This is also in the shared collaboration document in case you need it later. The code for that is 4455690. So welcome everybody and thank you. Our learning outcomes today will be trying to focus on the impact that state and regional conferences can have, the expectations that we'll have going with 2021 and beyond, best practices that we can all apply to these conferences, strategies that we might be taking in a virtual aspect, and reimagining both online and virtual conferences, and thinking about a little bit about what's next. So I thank you for coming again today. And now I'm going to ask that our panelists invite themselves to tell us a little bit more about themselves. So I'll start with Stephen Bell. Stephen, if you don't mind, introducing a little bit about your experience.
Sure. Thanks, Rebel. Thanks, everyone, for being here today. I'm currently affiliated with Affordable Learning Pennsylvania. I chair our steering committee. And we've had two of what we call our summits to date. The first one was all in person on site. And we were certainly planning for that for 2020, but over time it became clear that that wasn't going to be possible. So we shifted gears and had our first all virtual conference that took place over 3 weeks. And it went very well. And I hope to have opportunity to talk more about what some of the things we learned from our experience that could be helpful to others moving ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. Matt, you want to take a minute and just tell us a little bit about yourself? Your past
Sure. Yeah, my name is Matthew Bloom. I'm English faculty at Scottsdale Community College, which is in the Phoenix metropolitan area, but I've been since 2018 the Open Educational Resources Coordinator for the Maricopa Community Colleges District, which is a pretty large district across the area. And we, this is going to be our third year now offering the Arizona Regional OER Conference. It'll be virtual this year. We are still in the early planning stages and we're a little late in the game. So I'm actually really excited to learn from everyone else on this panel and also from the audience about that. And also, I've worked with CCC OER on a lot of professional development programming, including webinars, and gone to some events with them as well. So hopefully, you know, I'm honored to be here to share any of that experience.
Thank you so much. Amanda, can you unmute and just tell us a little bit about yourself and your past experience?
Hi, my name is Amanda Coolidge. I'm Director of Open Education at BC Campus, and I'm joining you today from the Esquimalt and Song traditional unceded territories of the Esquimalt and Songhees Nations of the Algonquin-speaking peoples, also known as Victoria, British Columbia. And my experience has really been more as a host and a co-organizer. Currently we're working on organizing the semi-annual Cascadia Open Education Conference, which is usually held in Vancouver, British Columbia, but this year, April will be virtual. It's in collaboration with Oregon, Washington, and California. We also I generally host and co-organize the semi-annual Festival of Learning, which didn't happen this year due to COVID. And I'm also a former program committee member for the Open Education Conference. And like Matt, I'm here to learn from a lot of you as well, because we're really in the early stages of trying to imagine this. And I have some things that we've been able to do, but I'm excited to hear more from others.
Thank you. Stephanie, yeah, unmute and tell us a little bit about yourself and your past experience.
Yes, so my name is Stephanie Pierce, and I am the head of the physics library at the University of Arkansas, where I work on the OER team to help move our conversion program forward. But I also have been the organizer of the Open Education Southern Symposium, which we held our first one in 2018. 2019, we didn't hold a full day and a half like previous. We actually just did a one-day thing during Open Ed Week. And then this year, unfortunately, got canceled because we just didn't feel like we could put on a really good virtual conference in such a short time. But prior to that, before COVID all hit, I also helped organize a state one-day conference for Arkansas called OE Arkansas, because, you know, I love some puns. And then I'm currently a member of the Future of Open Ed for this particular conference as well. So, you know, helping our community figure out what this conference looks like moving forward. And hopefully, you know, we've been getting a lot of great feedback, and we want to take that and just make this even better next year.
Thank you. So we have told you a little bit about ourselves. In the attendees notes, I'm going to ask you guys to please feel free to share and discuss a little bit about yourselves. Tell us a little bit, what's your experience with state and regional OER conference planning, and what has your conference experience been like so far in 2020? And also, if our panelists want to take just a second and maybe
yeah, do you want me to share the
past experience?
Would you like me to share the Mentimeter for this one?
Yeah, if you can.
Okay. So if everyone can go ahead and
from me, or do I need to stop?
No, I got it. If everyone can go ahead and also add to their Mentimeter, you can see here we've got quite a few people here. Have you participated in the planning of a state or regional conference? And Stephen, I don't want to take over your talk here, so I can move the Mentimeter along as you.
Sure. I could go ahead with answering question number one. As I said, we had our first virtual conference in 2020. It was back in September. We had originally planned for an in-person conference starting back in January. One of the things we learned from our very first conference is that we didn't give ourselves enough time for the planning. So we really started early, but then because of the uncertainty as to whether you'd even be able to have a physical conference in August of 2020, which is what we were originally planning, we really had to hold off until June to decide whether we should go all virtual. And then as we saw more and more conferences going all virtual, we decided to do that. So we really didn't have quite enough time, and we ended up having to move our conference back to September. And we very quickly organized ourselves into 4 different groups for logistics, programming, communication, and just general oversight. So things ended up going pretty well. In the end, we decided, I think one of the things that helped us quite a bit is that we had a third-party organization, Learning Times, do the support for our virtual conference. And we ended up having it on 3 Wednesdays and Fridays in September. That's another big decision that you have to make is, do you want to have it all on one day? Do you want to space it out? If you space it out, how far do you want to space it out? Those are some of the considerations for the virtual conference. So I'll stop there, and perhaps we can get into some of the details as we get to other questions. I'll pass it along to someone else who wants to comment on their experience on the panel.
Stephanie, are you trying to speak?
Sorry, it's Amanda. Sorry. I was like, oh, the mute button. Anyway, what I'm doing here is just sharing what people are putting up here. As you can see, they're saying, we asked the question, what is your experience? And some have been saying, oh, so much work, none. I haven't planned, but have planned dozens of others. So these are these will continue to be up as we continue through the questions.
Yeah, and I would add, you know, for us for 2020, we were actually going to co-host with North Carolina State. And so when everything happened, it wasn't just us locally at the University of Arkansas who have been like the, you know, main hosts for a good portion, but also what my fellow planning committee members at NC State. So I really was looking at what were people's capacities at the time and everything. So, you know, I talked with them and we all just decided it was best to just hold off and resume planning this fall for 2021 to really get an idea of what people were going to maybe do for virtual conferences. Because, you know, I can plan an in-person one, but moving virtual is a whole other ballgame.
I would say that our experience was similar to Stephanie's and Stephen's, that we kind of were ready to go, but when it came down to kind of really put the word out, we had to withdraw because things were moving at such a rapid pace, and things were so unsure, and so we're really just gearing up for 2021. So. And Amanda has a new poll up for Menti. If you guys want to put in a word or words, keywords or phrases that you would describe your conference experience.
So what's interesting about Mentimeter is the more times people put in a similar word, it pops up much bigger. So there might be ones that are completely unique, which looks like what we're experiencing right now, which is awesome. I would say interesting, we were just talking prior to us joining this call, and we were saying, Mandy, who's hosting this for us, said, what's been your experience so far? And I was sharing that this is actually my first virtual attendance of a conference, and I've actually really enjoyed it. I think partly because I've actually put aside the time to make it happen versus sort of juggling between a few things. But I really felt like, I've tried to join another one back in the start of COVID, and I found the technology just to be really frustrating. So this has been a really good experience. We've got a lot of people saying virtual, overwhelmed, Zoom fatigue, distracted. Yeah. I'll stop sharing.
Yeah, and I can connect with those who are the Miss Fellowship. No, go ahead.
Sorry, I was just going to say I'm going to stop sharing this one because I think the next set of Menti questions is related to the next person talking.
Okay, let's go back. So I just wanted to briefly overview some of the things that we have seen from the pandemic. We've seen limited travel, limited in-person gathering. Our space locations have maybe not been available, even if we wanted to have an in-person event. In-person events have increased transmission risks. We've seen increase in our technology requirements for both us as hosts and those who might come as attendees. And we've also seen reduced timelines, which is concerning when we all have reported just recently in the last slide that we needed more time to do this. So ways that you can get involved might be as a state representative, as an individual, or as a vendor. And there are many different roles that you could play in a conference, ranging all the way from an administrator, planning, a committee member, a volunteer, or simply just providing money as a sponsor. So question 2, we're going to roll on, and sorry, Matthew, you're going to take over here. Can you?
Yeah, sure. I mean, you know, I can't presume to know all the best practices for planning conferences, but I will tell you that that some of the ideas we have on the next slide, I mean, this question right here is just basically focused on, you know, what are some tips that you might actually, you know, maybe get from this. But these are just some things that kind of I learned in the process of learning from people who know what they're doing. In fact, that's a thing I'll get to later. But, you know, I'm not going to read through all this stuff right here, but there are a few very specific kind of details. I think one of them was just making sure that you actually, if you're trying to do something that is outside of just a single institution, you know, you can always invite people from other institutions, but it's really a good idea to make sure that there's buy-in, you know, make sure that you have representation from those institutions. For example, with the Arizona Regional OER Conference, our program committee, you know, we have Maricopa Community Colleges is 10 separately accredited colleges itself, but we try to get representation from all of that, but we also try to make sure that we have somebody from each, and we have had somebody from each of the major state universities, Northern Arizona University, University of Arizona, and Arizona State, all on that team, as well as Pima Community College, and some other of the, you know, community colleges across the state. So I think that having that kind of broad representation is great because it's inclusive, and it also, you know, you're more likely to get a lot of kind of interaction between, you know, if you're looking for cross-institutional collaboration, then that kind of helps to foster that because people get that buy-in. One thing that I would say as well is that, you know, the presentations are great for some people, but a lot of people really like the hands-on type of workshops. There was actually at the Open Education Conference last year, there was a pre-conference some folks may have heard of or attended called OER Arizona, talk about OER Arkansas, but it was OER Arizona Conference, but it was a pre-conference, and I was very only obliquely related to the planning of that. But they had, we've kind of learned from them in a sense and tried to make sure to focus a lot more on, you know, actually getting people to spend the time that they're spending at the conference doing something that is productive rather than just kind of watching a, you know, a series of sessions. But again, it's kind of like the next point right here. You can't really please everybody, you know, especially with session length. When we had long sessions, then people complained the sessions are too long. When we made the sessions 25 minutes, people complained that the sessions were too short. And so I think that trying to figure out a balance or providing a variety of those things can be very helpful. And I would say very important is to try to embed whatever you're doing into an existing institutional structure, because one thing that I just have to, one thing I know about myself is that, first of all, I can't do it on my own, and I don't know how to plan conferences. Like when I first was like, let's do an Arizona Regional OER Conference, it was like, you know, I didn't really understand what I was getting myself into, and if it weren't for the experienced people at the Maricopa Center for Learning and Innovation and all of the great people we had on our program committee and on the Maricopa Millions team, we wouldn't have been able to make it happen. So it really was a team effort, and we definitely relied on program coordinators, people who understood the logistics and understood, getting the quotes and making sure that all the contracts are signed and all those kinds of things. So it's really important to try to focus on that.
That's excellent information. So what are some best practices that we saw from the first question? Quite a few of you in the audience, or majority of you, have experience with state and regional conferences. So we'd love to hear what your best practices are. Share now. Again, anything here in the Menti or in the shared document, whichever way you prefer to share, or in the chat. We're going to try to collect everything.
Can I just add one response to, there's a lot of stuff going on in the chat, but one point that Regina Gong has made here is about choosing a date that works. And that was an experience that we had as well. The first time we did the Arizona Regional OER Conference, we were really excited to invite all these people from across the state and beyond. And we didn't do enough research into local events that were taking place in some places. And it was there was really unique Tucson centric event called Rodeo Days that corresponded with it, and people have it off, and everyone had those dates already booked for vacations and events and things like that. And being a Phoenician myself, I had no clue that that was even something that existed. So that's another one of those communication pieces early on. Try to spread it out, see who your audience is or who your expected participants are, and try to get some feedback from them, maybe even before you choose a date.
And I would just echo that, Matt. So in 2018, we held our OESS at the end of October, and we just found that for a lot of people who wanted to come, or instructors that we were hoping to get participated, doing it in the middle of a semester is not the greatest idea because people are hitting midterms and stuff. So when we moved to planning for 2020, we decided to move it to midsummer to try to make it easier for people to travel, maybe plan a vacation around it. And so I agree with what Regina and what the chat has been saying, picking a date, doing some research around it to try to eliminate as many barriers or conflicts as possible is so important. And if you compare it up with another event, that's also another thing to consider.
Can I make one more comment based on, while we're waiting for the screen here, Christine Jones, hi Christine, from Maricopa, talking about the Arizona Regional Conference. One of the best practices also is, think intentionally and strategically, I guess, about whether or not you're going to purchase swag and distribute it. And then if you do, try to make sure that it's something that's valuable. I'm not sure if you've had the experience or not, but going to some conferences in the past, the stuff that's created is just plastic garbage that just ends up in the ocean. And so, if you're going to basically purchase stuff and have it created so that it can be distributed to people, make it meaningful. So we got socks, and we actually got pizza cutters last time. So I guess cutting, I think the pun was supposed to be cutting away barriers to student success or something. But when I ask people, when I follow up about it, what do you think about that? Everybody says that they use those things on a regular basis. So at least it's something that has some utility, and it's not just a flashing pin or something like that.
Yeah, I won't even say what happened with our swag in our first year. So we were going to get coffee cups, and we, ordered well in advance, and something went wrong. So, and then, I felt horrible because that was part of the thing that we factored into the registration price. But everyone was like, we didn't even notice, and then the swag question is really interesting, because I think when you're talking about registration prices, what do people want when they're spending money? Is it swag, or would they prefer us to put that money towards something else, especially in person or virtual, like childcare or accessibility needs and things. So the whole swag question and what registration costs and prices pay for is a really interesting one that I love to follow on Twitter when it always pops up.
We always find a lot of money goes to food too, right? So now that we're not in person, that's a big factor. So planning committee, I just wanted to quickly review this, and then we're going over. Basically, we have either some strong advocacy teams, some which are basically committees, right, to leadership teams or volunteers, and I think that is something that we see pretty often. So. And I think the question actually, somehow the slide got before the question. So I'm going to click to the slide or question first, and then I'm going to click back, and then I'm going to click over it. So the question is, the next question is, how do we create inclusive conferences, supporting diversity and promoting diversity? And what are the strategies for engaging all the different role types that we have who may be interested in open education? So some of the things that BC's doing.
Yeah, so there's a few things that we've been doing. So for anybody who's attended our actual face-to-face conferences, you'll know that we offer childcare services for parents who are unable to, would have a barrier to attendance. So this year with the virtual sessions, we've actually contracted Helm Life, which is a virtual childcare service. And they basically have interactive classes that are grouped by age and recommended for children between the ages of 3 and 12. So you can explore the format and types of activities. And so each child has the opportunity to participate in 2 40-minute sessions. And then that sort of helps around that idea. The other thing we do is we have a code of conduct. So similar to this conference, we have a code of conduct that provides a safe, harassment-free learning environment. And all attendees, speakers, sponsors, organizers, and volunteers must agree with the BC Campus Code of Conduct as part of representation, as part of registration. So anyone who violates that may be expelled from the conference, and that sort of happens. One of the things I did, I'm just going to go ahead and share my screen because I have a Mentimeter question here coming up, but I'll continue to talk about our efforts here, but just so you can also participate. Just a second. So one of the things we've also noticed is that the pandemic has been a huge learning experience for many educators. So we've had to really shift quickly from face-to-face to online. And so to help with this, we've started what's called a BC Campus Professional Learning Grant. It focuses on funding for BC post-secondary educators to better access professional development to help gain knowledge and skills they would need to teach online. And the goal of the Learning Grant is to support the addition of diverse voices, ideas, and perspectives in our events. One of the things that we also do is we put together a presenter toolkit, and I'll put all the links into the chat here. But the idea is that we're providing opportunities for the presenter to understand better how to create accessible presentations. So the main premise is we say, when you're designing a slide, please assume that someone is blind, has low vision, is hard of hearing, is deaf, and has low mobility. So we're trying our best to do all of those things, but that's what we've done. And of course, as I said, I'll put these links in the chat, but I'd love to hear also, what are you doing to create an inclusive conference that supports and promotes diversity?
And while we're waiting for your responses to come in, I'll just say that we did kind of look at Amanda's BC Code of Conduct when we were applying a Code of Conduct to ours. And I also took her advice of incorporating that into the registration form so that attendees know up front basically what the rules of your program are going to be. And also it makes people, I think, aware just coming forward to that conference that it's something that, you know, that you're looking at and you're conscious of.
So yeah. Oh, sorry,
go ahead. No, you go ahead. Go.
I was just going to say, I see like the registration and the conversation about prices and stuff. So for us, one of my goals when I decided to start organizing OESS was to really provide the opportunity for those within the Southern region who maybe don't get or have the privilege or the support at their institutions to participate in these larger conferences, national, international. Maybe their state doesn't have a state-focused one like Florida. So I was really conscious about making sure that the registration fee would be low and trying to make it to where, eventually we would have partners that we can move around. So it wasn't always going to be centralized in Fayetteville where we held our first one, which is why we partnered with NC State to make it accessible for travel, keep things low cost as much as possible. And as, with the virtual aspect, I think the ideal is no registration fees, but when it comes to technology and making sure things are inclusive, that includes sometimes paying for interpreters or captioning services. And if you don't have, you only have a certain amount of commitment to support that, but that cost goes over, you may have to look into having even lower registration fees, maybe not as much as what the in-person one was, but you do. And also just really want to make sure that you're reaching out, as somebody said, to the marginalized groups that are attending and making sure that, they are represented in your programming, that you're not just having a bunch of, homogeneous presenters out there. So I think that's really important.
One thing I also want to say is that I put the links here in the chat. So the example of, you can take a look at what we've been doing for virtual childcare, the code of conduct, and presenter toolkit. One thing I wanted to say is this is CC BY. So and we are going to be moving that into Pressbooks so that other people could take that and use it, but it does have a ton of great accessibility suggestions and things that you might want to think about. And then lastly is about the grant. And the reason that all these say Studio 20 is because we have a event happening next week. So that's where all those are coming from.
And I would add just one more thing about thinking about kind of making sure that you have representation from all the different kind of stakeholders in the educational instance, so for example, one thing that we did last year was we had a special session for administrators. We even got like a special speaker to come in who was an administrator so that we could kind of focus on that, because we felt like it would be a benefit to actually, have someone have like some programming specifically designed for kind of the different roles. And the other thing that is really important, which I actually felt like was kind of missing a little bit last year at the Arizona Regional Conference, was we did not have a student panel. We had a few students in attendance, but the year before that, and then the year before that, when we did this dialogue day, which was like a mini conference thing, we had student panels at both of those events. And even, I don't know if you've ever attended like the previous Open Ed conference or a conference where you do have a panel of students talking about their experiences with OER and affordability. My honest thought about those panels is that they are like really amazing, and you get that pathos that is just grabs you. But if you see 2 or 3 of those student panels, you kind of hear the same things over and over again. It's the same kind of the issues that students have with access and things like that. But it's kind of like not a big deal for it to be repetitive. And there's always somebody in the audience who didn't see the student panel last time or whatever. So if it feels like you're just like going out of your way to wrangle students in, oftentimes during a school day, they have classes, they have part-time jobs or whatever, it's worth that effort, because being able to kind of magnify the student voice as much as possible and get them involved is a challenge, but it's worth it.
So I was going to add here too, that's a great point, is that at BC campus, all students can attend for free. And this year for Cascadia 2020, which is happening April 26th to the 29th, all registrants are free. So come one, come all, join us. It'll be a great open conference. There's a really great slide here with other inclusive strategies. Some of these are geared towards the face-to-face, but I think they're also really great tips. So I did not write this slide. So whoever did, if you want to add in your thoughts on that, I love it.
So I just wanted to, these are some of the things that we've collected across and some of the things that we've put out there. So with the tier pricing, this is a way obviously to include multiple different levels of fiscal support, social media, engaging that maybe that younger crowd or that that more socially technology engaged area. Something that we added, but in our in-person events, and I think will transition well to our online, is the trial access for the vendors. So we make our vendors actually give a year's worth of trial access to their products, so that way our members have really a lot of time to convince administration to try it out, and then even get a pilot rolling into the product and actually really test it. Something that we need to just remember, that people have lives going on beyond the conference. And I think that was something that we saw in those Menti polls, the overwhelming, the stress, the need for the child kind of constraints that still have on our lives, even as we go through these professional events. And so mothers are still going to need to take time to have those lactation periods. We're still going to need to have, those anxiety and those decompression. We're going to still need those social things. We're still going to need to be conscious of those times where a massive group of people may want to have prayer and may not be able to attend a keynote session beyond just like local events that we've talked about here that may be conflicting. So there are lots of different things, and we've shown those. So I'm going to move on to the next slide. We just wanted to list and ask you guys to, what are the changes that you're seeing coming forward? These are just a couple I think I put out. Maybe they're all social, because I'm really missing that social piece, I think, engagement with the conferences. One of the things that I used to do is try to meet 5 new people at each event. And that's one of the things that I'm just saying I'm a failure at right now. I've not been able to do that in any of the conferences that I've gone to so far. I've done, I think, one. I've been able to meet 1 new person at a conference. So that's something that I'm struggling with. And how do we still include those sponsors? Because, as we mentioned, low registration costs means that somebody else has to come in and help support that. So how do we include those sponsors and make sure that they're heard and that they're included in sessions and people are attending those, or they have that one-to-one interactions that they might not be getting? And something that I have a concern for is that committee engagement. I know that we get a lot of our committee members recruitments and retainment through that conference engagement and showing up and being a part of the team. So that's something that I want to look forward to, or look at going forward. And so I'm going to pass it on to Stephanie now for question 4. How can we do this better, Stephanie?
So I'm definitely not an expert on this, but for me, this was something I really thought a lot about after hosting our first symposium, because as Matt said, sometimes you start getting into this and you have no clue where to start. So when I first began planning, I kind of had a mission view of what it was that I, wanted the conference to achieve. So because I didn't have an idea of where to start after that, I reached out to others who were planning similar events that I was looking at holding, like Rebel here. I spoke with her when she was planning the OER vision into action. And then Devin Super down at Florida State had planned a some day symposium. So I reached out to them and sought some insight and advice on putting together a conference. But after the 2018 symposium and receiving a lot of positive feedback from attendees, I wanted to make it easier for others to hold open ed events or conferences. And I was lucky enough to be part of the Spark Open Education Leadership Fellowship Program at that time. And so I was able to take that idea and turn it into a capstone project that I created under the tutelage of Marilyn Billings, who has her own vast experience with hosting many open ed events. And I created the Open Education Event Planning Guidebook and Toolkit that is talked about here. And this was just me getting started, but it was really designed to be a community of practice resource. So I was hoping, like, as others who are planning these events would contribute materials and resources and ideas to it, so others wouldn't have to be like, where do I start out? We could give them a good idea of, these are the things you need to think through. Here's a timeline for recommendations. And so if you're wanting to help with that, please, reach out to me. I would love to build it up and out and really expand on what was there. I was hoping to work on it this summer, but with COVID, everything sort of just changed with that. And so my priorities shifted a little bit. But of course, other ideas, is for coordination, or like shared folders and documents, having them, linked on your maybe event website, just sharing them out afterwards via Twitter and things. But Google Drive products really make collaborations across states, institutions, countries so easy. And, I'm a Google person, but, there are others out there. So not an advertisement just for Google, but that's just what I normally work with. And then forming online community groups. So, Rebel has the state OER leaders, but maybe we need to form a secondary group that is just for folks who are putting on events. That'd be like, hey, have you guys tried this? I know in the Open Education Network email, that's for members, so the communication is just a little bit restricted. But these are all some possible ideas out there. And then, of course, apply the Creative Commons licenses to your resources, just to let everybody know, like, you're more than welcome to use these, adapt these as you need. But I'll let others chime in on what, how they think.
I was going to say, Stephanie, we should talk about putting in the presenter toolkit into your OER event toolkit.
I would love that. Absolutely love that, Amanda.
Yeah, this is Stephen. One thing that might be a natural progression is that we are seeing, it's great that we're seeing more state level conferences to bring people together, but I wonder if we should be thinking in the future of multi-state programs. I think you mentioned Maryland, and the Northeast Regional Conference is maybe a good example of trying to bring more people into the fold, and again, combine our resources and do something like we might have in this area, Mid-Atlantic, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Maryland, and so on. That might be really interesting to try, and that would be a great way to coordinate our efforts and reduce all the time and energy and bring more people in to help with the conference. So maybe we'll see more of that.
Yeah, I would absolutely love more regional conferences and stuff. I see in the chat, easier, for travel, make great local connections. I mean, a lot of times you're getting to meet and talk with those who maybe are facing similar governmental regulations and things like that. So seeing how other institutions, maybe institutions within your own conference, like I know Melissa's at Vanderbilt and I'm at the University of Arkansas, so we're SEC schools. So, the SEC has their own priorities and things. So I think regional conferences really does help create that more localized connection on top of just being easier to get to.
Sorry, trying to find that unmute.
Sorry, Rebel,
go ahead,
there's a great statement or question here from Jonathan that I don't know if Stephanie wants to answer. So one goal of regional conferences is to create a community of practice within easy driving distance. As online conferences remove these distance barriers, is there a danger that regional conferences will morph into inter or national conferences? Do you have a thought on that?
Sorry, thought I was unmuted. So I've thought about how it grows, but for me, I think it's staying rooted in your original mission of who is it that you are, the stakeholders that you're trying to reach and support, and ensuring that your planning of that and your programming of that represents that original mission. We encourage people from all over, of course, to come present because, you know, people are doing great work across the nation. But our target when we, you know, advertise and go into planning is thinking, how can we benefit those within the region? And part of that is also selecting keynotes and invited talks from those within the region. So we don't necessarily look broader than that, though there are great speakers that we would love to have, but we really do focus on who is it within our regional community who can share their experiences and how do we amplify that work? Because again, our concern is that people weren't having the same opportunities. And for the virtual setting, yes, people can come from all over, but again, our goal is to address the needs of our regional. So I think it's just staying rooted to that and ensure your programming represents that.
One thing that we've, I think just in response to that, you know, the idea of it growing, you know, we always called it the Arizona Regional OER Conference because the idea was to not limit it to just like the kind of arbitrary state borders, even though we have, you know, a shared kind of like system of like education funding and stuff in Arizona that's different in other states and that kind of thing. So one of the things is, you know, we always envisioned it as trying to be inclusive and bringing people in. We've had attendees from Oklahoma and from Colorado and from California. But at the same time, one of the big focus points that we have moving forward is trying to really fashion collaboration and connection between the kind of K-12 system in our local areas, you know, with the higher education. And that's been a challenge, but that's just such a localized thing that, you know, it goes with what Stephanie was just saying. It's kind of like, what's the vision, what's the mission? But we certainly, you know, if it's going to be a hybrid model and we're going to have online offerings, then, you know, why not like let everyone kind of participate as long as you kind of keep, you know, keep focus on some of the goals, the actual outcomes that you have in mind for the event.
So that's a great segue to question 5. How do we actually make it happen? Sometimes we have to depend on third-party vendors' support in order to deliver the technology and the actual platform. So Stephen, can you tell us a little bit about your experience with third-party platforms?
Sure. This was a big decision that we had to make when we were planning our all virtual conference. And there's a lot of interesting conversation about, okay, what's the future of our conferences, sort of like what's the future of our workplaces now that we've seen that it's possible for lots of people to work from home that couldn't do it before. And we've now seen we can put on these online virtual conferences and they're usually pretty successful. And as everyone can see, more people can attend. It reduces barriers to access, but they're not without considerable technical requirements. It takes a lot of work to put on a virtual conference. If, you know, just think about all the people who are involved in putting on Open Ed 20, and we're not even seeing a lot of the back end activity that is required to make something like this work, so that when you go into a session, it's seamless and registration is seamless. You really want it to be a great user experience. So we decided to put some of the funds we didn't spend for things that would normally be spent at a face-to-face conference by bringing in a Learning Times network. Now, I don't know that they're the only ones out there who help you put on your virtual conference. There may be others. This might be a big business now that more people are going to be doing virtual conferences. But if you saw from the slide that was just up there before, I was showing that they put together an entire web interface for us. So it was like they took care of the registration, developing the schedule, having people make it very easy to get to the session that you wanted to get to. They took care of the technical support. We still use Zoom as the platform, but we always had a tech person from Learning Times in every session to make sure that everything went all right. So having that third-party vendor really helped us to have, I think, a much better conference experience for everyone, because it ran more seamlessly. Sessions went off without any technical hitches. They had our backs. They were very involved with us in the planning. So if you can find a good vendor, if you're going to have a virtual conference, it's probably going to save you a lot of headaches, time, and energy to have someone help you with all those pieces. And the other great thing is that they're keeping the conference site up and running for, I believe, a year, so that people have plenty of time to get to all the recorded sessions. So if they, for whatever they might have missed for whatever reason. So it really worked out well. And even if we did hybrid, I think we still would want to have a third party helping us out with the online version. I see somebody asked about the cost, and I would venture to say that you could anticipate around $5,000 for that level of support. And again, might vary in different parts of the country. And also I think the cost also varied on how much you wanted them to do. And there's a slide actually that says, has a couple of points about working with a virtual vendor. So I don't know if we can get that slide up. Yeah, here are just a couple of suggestions. And one of them is, if you do want to keep the costs lower, you might say, well, let's just have a virtual vendor, a third-party vendor, to do our keynotes. So we know the keynotes go really great. And then we can do all the other Zoom sessions ourselves, if you have enough people to be moderators and provide some technical support. The other thing that's great is that with a third-party vendor, they were able to provide training to the speakers so that the speakers knew exactly what to do. They sent out detailed information to all the speakers so they would know, they had the logins and they knew exactly what to do. So it really made things run more smoothly. And it took a lot of the headaches and concerns and stresses so that the people who were running the conference can actually enjoy the conference, because you want to be able to do that too. Thank you.
So I know we're running out of time, but I did want to say I had something kind of similar, an in-house service at Kansas State University that was available for conferences and events, but I will say that it was probably 4 times the cost that Stephen quoted, just so there could be a wide range in the services depending on which vendor or which supplier that you use. Again, I know we're tight on time, but I do want to make sure that we give the audience a chance to ask any direct questions. We tried to answer questions as we were going along. I know everybody was kind of trying to ingest answers to the questions that they were seeing coming through the chat as they were speaking. But if there was anything that we missed or anything that you want to ask directly now, I would like to open the floor up to our audience to let us know your reflections, your questions, or comments.
So I'm actually going to stop our recording since we're at time, but we can stay and ask some questions here. So just one second.